There has never been a Speaker of the House in the history of the United States that is weaker than Mike Johnson, and it is because he has purposely ceded all of his power to Donald Trump. He is simply a puppet with a title, yet that is not good enough for Donald Trump, who is threatening to strip him of all of his power in the latest Truth Social tirade that he went on, and it's because Donald Trump sees the writing on the wall, and largely it's coming from Republicans in the House revolting against him, and the polling that is damning ahead of these midterms. And it is why you hear Donald Trump talking a lot more about the SAVE Act recently, the legislation Donald Trump wants to put in place to make it more difficult for people who he doesn't want to vote to be able to vote. It is what led, along with Mike Johnson, to this Truth Social tirade we are going to get into. But we got to start with Jim McGovern, who perfectly called out how illegitimate this piece of legislation is in this clip right here.
I'm reading the bill. This is the Save America Act. I have news from my Republican friends. Americans don't want to be saved by you. They don't want you screwing up the next elections. They don't want you to make it more difficult for them to participate in the next election. And they certainly do not want to have states' voting rolls turned over to Kristi Noem, who right now is overseeing a government agency that is killing innocent Americans in our streets. I mean, this is crazy. So let me just start off this hearing by stating some facts. There is no widespread voter fraud in the United States of America. It is simply not true to say that voter fraud or non-citizens voting is a massive widespread issue. That is not to say that that our system is perfect. We face issues when it comes to cyber attacks, foreign disinformation, intimidation, and violence against election workers. Those are all important issues that we should be addressing today, but we are not. We are not. Instead, we're considering a bill that is fundamentally predicated on a lie. There is extensive documentary evidence that voter fraud, voter impersonation, and non-citizens voting is not a widespread issue. It is a myth perpetrated by people whose real goal is to suppress the rights of American citizens, citizens who are legally and constitutionally entitled to cast their ballot, and to prevent American citizens from participating in our elections. Republicans are pushing the Save America Act because they want fewer Americans to vote. It's that simple. Republicans have looked high and low to find fraud. And you know what they've found? Someone is more likely to get struck by lightning than to vote illegally.
No one knows how unpopular Donald Trump is more than Donald Trump, because he has to fester in it every single day, and it is driving him crazy, so crazy that Republicans are bringing forth some of the worst voter suppression legislation we have ever seen. And it's really funny to see them try and defend this. There's been a lot of posting from the right about how, oh, look, Barack Obama used his ID to vote, or we use our ID in Congress to vote, even though, as we talked about yesterday, Byron Donalds actually doesn't, and he breaks the law in doing so. But that's not what this is about. Having your birth certificate and your passport and 3 other forms of documentation isn't just having an ID. Republicans want it to be impossible for people to vote. I would also raise the fact that women who have been recently married, whose married name is different than their maiden name, they are targeting you specifically. I wonder why an administration that has attacked women and wants to keep them out of our politics is trying to do that. I wonder why that could be. But this is Donald Trump's plan, and it's increasingly showing the concern that he has when he's talking about other elections.
You know, the first time I won, but they say I didn't win the popular vote. You know I did. I won it by a lot, but they say I didn't. So every time they'd introduce Donald Trump, who didn't win the popular vote, but he, whatever. I said, I don't ever want that to happen again. But we did. We won everything. And this is
So that was Donald Trump, as we talked about earlier today, at Fort Bragg, saying, well, quite frankly, I won every election, and I never want to feel the pain of losing another. Donald Trump in front of troops who he wants to send to polling locations, saying he doesn't want to feel the pain of losing an election in a complete humiliation ever again. I think that should inform how we view what Donald Trump wants to do ahead of the midterms, which is why, as the SAVE Act is struggling to get support in Congress, Donald Trump is lashing out and threatening to strip Mike of the last bit of power he has left. Donald Trump took to Truth Social in a lengthy post writing, "Quite frankly, we cannot let the Democrats get away with no voter ID any longer. These are horrible, disingenuous cheaters. They have all sorts of reasons why it shouldn't be passed." Donald Trump talking about the SAVE Act, and then boldly laugh in the back rooms after their ridiculous presentations. If it weren't such a serious matter, it would be considered a total joke. No, voter ID is even crazier and more ridiculous than men playing in women's sports, open borders, or transgender for everyone. Republicans must put this at the top of every speech. It is a can't miss for re-election in the midterms and beyond. Even Democrat voters agree 85% that there should be voter ID. It's only the political quote-unquote leaders, crooked losers like Schumer and Jeffries, that have no shame and explain why it's racist and every other thing that they can think of. Trump says this issue must be fought and must be fought now. If we can't get it through Congress, there are legal reasons why this scam is not permitted. I will be presenting them shortly in the form of an executive order. Trump says if we can't get it through Congress, I will be passing it through an executive order. Quite frankly, I hope the Supreme Court realizes as they painstakingly review the very simple topic of country-saving tariffs, those same tariffs that have been used by other countries against the USA to drain it of all its treasure and security for many years, and all sorts of other things that are making our country rich, powerful, and safe again, that these corrupt and deranged Democrats, if they ever gain power, will not only be adding 2 states to our roster of 50 with all of the baggage thereto, but will also pack the court, and the total amount of Supreme Court justices will be 21. This is their dream. It sounds like a great dream to me, actually, which they will submit easily and rapidly when they immediately move to terminate the filibuster, probably in their first week or sooner. Our country will never be the same if they allow these demented and evil people to knowingly and happily destroy it. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So Donald Trump is now saying that Mike Johnson being his complete puppet and going along with anything and everything that he wants is not enough. And why? It's because Congress, and specifically a handful of Republicans, continue to revolt against Donald Trump. Whether it is the Epstein files, voting to release them with a discharge petition that Donald Trump was actively campaigning against so hard that he brought Lauren Boebert to the White House, brought her to a little secure location, brought her to the Situation Room, and tried to pressure her. Donald Trump sees the Epstein files vote, sees a vote through another discharge petition on Obamacare subsidies, sees the recent vote 6 Republicans telling him to fuck off when it comes to tariffs, and Donald Trump is very worried about how Congress might buck him on the SAVE Act. And so, Donald Trump is now saying to Mike Johnson, well, I don't think you should have any power anymore, and we're just going to, quite frankly, we'll take it all the power, it's going to be me. Mike Johnson has no power. Mike Johnson is simply an extension of Donald Trump. And again, even that is not good enough for dear leader. He is saying, Mike, I am going to make it obvious to the world that you have no power. I am going to be usurping Congress completely, and I'm going to be in charge. And why you know that even Republicans think this is a bad idea is because they always ask about it in the context of well, what if down the line Democrats did this? What Donald Trump is saying is that, oh, we have to steal all the power from Congress, and I should just be God King, because when Democrats come in, they're going to want to do the same thing, and that's bad. So in a way, they're always admitting that what Donald Trump is doing is bad. But Donald Trump now directly threatening Congress, saying he's going to take everything over, because again, he knows how bad his polls are. And Lawrence O'Donnell broke that down perfectly right here.
Today's winner of the daily competition for most perverse thing said by a Trump cabinet member said, and these are the exact words, quote, I'm not scared of a germ, you know. I used to snort cocaine off of toilet seats. Unfortunately, guessing who said that about germs and cocaine and toilet seats is easier than it should be.
I'm not scared of a germ. You know, I used to snort cocaine off of toilet seats.
Yes, that is Donald Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services telling us why we shouldn't be afraid of communicable diseases, at least the ones he didn't get from toilet seats. It would be nice if we could regard something like that as funny. But he is the sociopath who deliberately steered people to their deaths with his opposition to vaccines, the single greatest advance in the history of medicine. Donald Trump has found more ways to kill more people during peacetime than any president in history. He appoints a madman to be the Secretary of Health. And then with Elon Musk's guidance, Donald Trump takes food away from people in the middle of famine in Africa. He took HIV medicine away from people who needed to survive, medicine that was being delivered in Africa thanks to the initiative of Republican President George W. Bush. Donald Trump said, no, we don't want to save those lives. The food was already in transit to those starving people, and Donald Trump became the first president in history to deny food to starving people. The United States of America has been helping people for 200 years in famine until Donald Trump said, let them die. Let them starve to death. Because Elon Musk wanted them to. The world's richest man killing the world's poorest children. And so, how does a protester on the streets of Minneapolis get through the heartless depravity that defines Donald Trump and surrounds Donald Trump? Video recordings proved Renee Good and Alex Preddy were murdered in Minneapolis by Donald Trump's invasion forces. And that made Donald Trump's invasion of Minneapolis ultimately politically untenable for him, as his poll numbers found new lows every week. And so after 2 murders, Donald Trump orders his invasion forces into retreat.
The man is floundering, and he is deeply scared of being as humiliated as he is going to be. That is what Donald Trump knows is going to happen, a humiliation of him, a rebuke of him, and the beginning of the end of his presidency as we know it. Donald Trump will have his most favored tools of corruption crushed, real accountability, hearings uncovering all that has been hidden. He knows that's what's coming, and it's why we have to continue to push for accountability.